welcome back to our channel. The air inside the Dupree estate that morning felt heavy, the kind of stillness that only comes when a storm is gathering beyond the horizon. Anita had woken with an unshakable restlessness, as if something unseen had been drawing closer for days. The polished floors gleamed under the filtered light from the high windows, and yet, despite the beauty of her surroundings, there was an undeniable tension clinging to the corners of every room. She moved through the grand hallways with the quiet precision of someone used to guarding her thoughts. Her mind already burdened by the delicate balancing act of family loyalties and political alliances that defined life in the gated community. She had no way of knowing that by the end of the day, the carefully constructed framework of her world would be cracked open by a revelation too deep to be undone. Barbara's sudden return was the first shock. She had been gone for years, vanishing under a haze of whispered scandal and unanswered questions, her absence becoming another mystery folded into the community's guarded history. Anita had not expected to ever see her again. Certainly not walking into the estate with the measured confidence of someone who had been waiting for exactly the right moment to reappear. There was an air of finality in the way Barbara carried herself, her gaze unwavering, as though she had crossed an invisible line and could no longer retreat. Anita's first instinct was to question her presence, to demand answers, but something in Barbara's expression made her pause. It was not arrogance, nor the defensive pride Anita remembered from their younger days. It was purpose, sharpened by years of holding onto a truth too volatile to share lightly. The revelation came without preamble. A single confession that would ripple through the fabric of the family and the community beyond its gates. Barbara claimed that Leslie was not who everyone believed her to be. That the woman who had been at the center of so many quiet storms in recent months was in fact the daughter of Vernon. The name landed with the weight of history. Vernon, whose influence in the community had been both feared and revered, whose decisions had altered the course of lives in ways both visible and hidden. His shadow stretched long over their past, and to connect Leslie to him was to invite an entirely new reading of every event that had shaped the Dupree legacy. Anita felt the ground beneath her shift in that instant. The truth rearranging the constellation of alliances and betrayals she thought she understood. As Barbara's words settled in the room, Anita's mind began to unravel the implications. Leslie, whose every move in recent months had seemed calculated yet unpredictable, whose loyalty was always the subject of quiet speculation, now carried the bloodline of a man whose decisions had left scars in the community. This was not simply a matter of lineage, it was a thread tied to the core of the estate's power structure. If true, it explained the subtle protections Leslie seemed to enjoy, the inexplicable way certain doors had opened for her when others were shut out. It also explained why her presence often provoked unease in those who remembered Vernon not as a figurehead but as a manipulator who shaped destinies without consent. Anita realized that the revelation was not a simple matter of personal identity, it was a political detonation. The estate, with its manicured gardens and pristine facades, had always been a stage for performances, each resident playing a role in the ongoing theater of wealth, influence, and control. Beneath that veneer, however, lay generations of tangled history. Much of it unspoken, all of it potent. Barbara's return was a disruption not only because of what she said, but because of who she was, a keeper of forgotten stories. A woman who had been silenced once and had now returned with the determination to speak. Anita, who had built her place in the community on a foundation of measured restraint, felt the danger in every syllable Barbara had spoken. The knowledge was a weapon, and in the wrong hands, it could undo not just reputations but entire alliances that had taken decades to forge. In the hours that followed, Anita could not escape the memory of the look in Barbara's eyes. It was not vindictive but resolute. As if she had carried this truth for so long that releasing it had become an act of survival. Anita wandered the estate's private corridors, her mind racing through every moment she had shared with Leslie, searching for clues she might have missed. Small gestures now seemed loaded with meaning, the way Leslie would avoid certain questions. The rare flicker of emotion when Vernon's name came up. The guarded smile that never quite reached her eyes. Anita began to see the pattern, the quiet avoidance that now read like a silent confession. The danger was not simply in the truth itself but in the timing. The community was already on edge, shaken by recent disputes over land, leadership, and the boundaries of influence. She knew that there were those who would use the information not to seek understanding but to destroy, to weaken Leslie's position, or to resurrect old grievances against Vernon's name. Anita considered the possibility that Barbara had chosen her deliberately as the first to know. Anita was now caught in the center of a game she had not agreed to play, forced to navigate the treacherous space between loyalty to the truth and loyalty to the stability of the community. Every decision from this point on would have consequences that could not be undone. The day stretched into evening. Shadows lengthening across the marble floors as Anita retreated to her private study. She pored over old photographs and records, tracing the connections between faces, dates, and events that had once seemed unrelated. Vernon's presence was there in subtle ways, his name appearing in old committee notes, his handwriting in the margins of contracts, his influence implied in the abrupt changes to certain family arrangements. The deeper she looked, the more she realized that Leslie's connection to him, if true, was not an isolated fact but a piece of a much larger puzzle. Outside, the estate was quiet, the world beyond its gates carrying on as if nothing had changed. Yet Anita knew that change had already begun. The return of Barbara, the revelation about Leslie, and the looming shadow of Vernon were forces that would not be contained for long. She understood that she had only a narrow window in which to act before the truth took on a life of its own, twisting into something unrecognizable in the mouths of those who thrived on scandal. By the time night fell, Anita had made no final decision. The enormity of the situation pressed on her, an invisible weight that made every breath feel measured. She thought of Leslie. Unaware that her life was on the brink of being redefined, and of Barbara, somewhere in the estate or perhaps already gone again, having set in motion a chain of events that could not be stopped. And always, at the center of it all, the unspoken presence of Vernon, whose legacy continued to shape the future long after his physical absence. Anita understood that what she had learned was not simply a fact, it was the key to a truth that could reorder the balance of power in ways no one could yet predict.